Alright, Incinerate is unplayable until exactly level 41. Oh, check this out. So before you have 51 total skill points, you will die easily, never have enough mana, not do enough damage, and just generally be weak as hell. But once it all comes together, oh boy. So let's start at the beginning. How do we get tanky enough to stand still and melt enemies is the first question we'll have to solve in order to play this build. Surprisingly, we'll be tanky enough as soon as we get 3 points in the warmth, potent warding, mana shield, and protection passives, then take the destructive incinerate and shimmering teleport perks, and finally have flame shield and ice armor equipped, which can both be activated in the middle of channeling incinerate without interrupting it. Then when we add the bathe in blood vampiric power, well, we channel and incinerate on top of the pool of blood that gets summoned, which I've thoroughly tested and it really is active almost all the time if you're worried about that. We are nigh invincible. That's not even accounting for all of the damage reduction aspects and affixes we'll get on gear and paragon nodes, so tankiness solved. But how do we get enough mana to be channeling Incinerate as much as we want to, which is infinitely, of course? Again, at exactly level 41, we'll have enough skill points to get everything we need. The enhanced ice armor perk takes a lot of the load off our shoulders, a surprisingly large portion of it to be honest. Next we'll put 3 points into the fiery surge and soulfire passives, as well as take the supreme inferno perk. These 4 instances of resource cost reduction and resource regen boosting don't even provide enough yet. So to round them off, we'll take double resource aspects on our rings in the prodigies aspect and the incendiary aspect, which are both aspects unlockable from doing dungeons, so that makes the state of the build very attainable. And now we've almost got enough mana for all of the content in the game. That took a lot, but the damage portion of this build takes even more to solve. And that's because we'll need more lucky hit chance than we'll ever be satisfied with in order to proc as many firewalls and meteors as we can from our enchantments. Now in groups of enemies, this is no big deal. We'll melt clumps like nobody's business, especially if we're using Inferno. However, single target, we're gonna have to get a bit creative here. First, we'll cast our firewall underneath the boss. Then we'll channel Incinerate in melee range because that's where it does the most damage. Then we'll cast Ice Armor to recover more mana once we're running kind of low on mana. Then we'll cast Inferno, another firewall, and then start channeling Incinerate again. And this should give us all the damage and mana we need to melt almost any boss in the game if we're doing at level content. But if there's a certain playstyle for bosses, how about for the hordes of trash mobs we'll be melting down before we get to said bosses? Easy. That's why we take the Mage's Firewall perk, because as far as most trash mobs are concerned, this is a firewall build, as there's literally no reason to pull out our flamethrower against weaker enemies, because numerically, Incinerate does the same amount of damage per second as 6 firewalls all burning an enemy at the same time do. You heard that right. And have any of us casted 6 firewalls in order to kill some flies or some bugs? No. At least though, yeah, let's talk about them. We'll have to constantly realign Incinerate in order to hit all the elite packs in a pack at the same time, especially those vampire teleporting fuckers, oh my god. And this is both for the reason that we want to deal a lot of damage with Incinerate, but also the amount of lucky hit chances we'll get once we're hitting multiple enemies is absolutely nutso, and leads us into the most interesting part about Incinerate, which is its lucky hit mechanics. From constant testing, here's why Incinerate is overpowered against groups of enemies. Each tick of damage on each enemy, each tick of damage on each enemy can each proc every lucky hit chance attached to Incinerate with no internal cooldown or limitations. Why this is a big deal is that only channeled skills, I'm guessing, function this way. Where normally on non-channeled skills, each time we press the skill, it can activate each lucky hit chance attached to it one single time. So even if we hit 100 enemies with 1 meteor and lucky hit chance mathematically goes off 100 times, only one of those times will activate. Whereas with Incinerate, we could technically activate our lucky hit chance 100 times on 100 enemies in the same moment. Testing the limits of this mechanic is difficult to do with the scientific process, but I constantly see multiple firewalls proccing from our firewall enchant simultaneously. And I do mean at the exact same time, just from a couple or a few enemies, so it is clearly visible. And once I noticed this extremely rare, mostly uncommon piece of information I haven't really heard anywhere else, I wanted to push this build as far as it could go, even if I was doing it for the memes at first. Now this is the bulk of the gameplay we'll experience with this build, but the late game of this build is absolutely ridiculous. I'll post an Incinerate versus all Uber bosses video soon, so look out for that to see just how insane this build can get, but I figured the gameplay shown in this video is enough to showcase the build's core interactions, strengths, weaknesses, and playstyle. Just remember, if you try to play with Incinerate before you're level 41, you're gonna have a rough time. It's doable, don't get me wrong, but it is slow as hell. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, let me know in the comments below, and I do read every comment, so just know you will be seen. Or come check me out live at twitch.tv/WamiWonga, whichever works for you. That's it from me, thank you, and stay safe out there.